Hello and welcome to my tutorial on how to create a full 3D character from start to finish. I'm going to show you the pipeline from gathering the photos to creating the model, texturing, retopologizing, reprojecting and rigging. Okay, so there are a few things you need before you start. The most important thing you'll need is some photos of your character. So for this example, I used 178 cameras, all pointing at me in a 360-degree dome. Thanks to 1024 in Sheffield, as they let me use their studio to get this photo set. However, if you don't have access to a photo scanning rig, then you can use a single camera and just get your actor to stand very still in a T pose or in an A pose, or whichever pose you want them to be in if you don't plan on rigging it, and go around in circles 360 degrees taking lots of photos of them. You need to make sure you have very even lighting conditions. You also need to make sure you have a fast shutter speed to reduce motion blur and a very slow aperture to reduce depth of field. So the next thing you'll need is a base mesh with animation ready topology. All this means is nice even sized quads and loops around the mouth, eyes, and just standard good animation topology. So thanks again to 1024 for letting me use their male base mesh kit, which I'll be using in this tutorial. You can make a base mesh yourself using Quad Draw in Maya. Alternatively, you can download one on the internet, but you need to find one that kind of matches the pose as best as possible as your character. So if you have a male, use a male one, female, use a female one. And if you can, get one with textures on it. So this one is fully textured. I'll be able to sample some of these textures for my character. So for example, if we look at the photos again, I'm actually wearing a wig cap here, so it wouldn't confuse the photogrammetry with the hair. So I'm going to have to replace that wig cap with a scalp. So this base mesh has a scalp that I'll be able to sample from. If I was doing this for a full production character, I would scan the character in kind of like a vest and shorts or underwear, and then make the clothing to go on top of that. That way I would be able to simulate the clothing for the cloth, and it would be a lot more realistic animation with the cloth reacting differently to the skin. But for this example, I will use the texture in the photos for the cloth and the clothing. I won't recreate simulated clothing. So let's get started. The first task in this process is to bring all your photos into a photogrammetry software. I've used Agisoft Photo Scan before. You can use PF Track, but today I'm going to use Reality Capture. First things first is to drag all your images into Reality Capture. You can do this by dragging and drop them, but sometimes that doesn't work, so you can use the import button up here. So all the photos are loaded. Next, it's pretty simple. You need to align the photos, but first let's have a look at the settings. I've played around with this, but my kind of recommended for doing a full photogrammetry rig scan is 2 error rate, so that's a error rate of 2 pixels accuracy, and about 80,000 for maximum features per image, and then 10,000 for maximum features per megapixel. And because we don't have a huge amount of overlap, we have 180 photos, we'll use medium overlap. And we don't need to downscale the images because I think that would be less accurate, although it would be a lot quicker to align the images. So all this process does is it's an automatic feature tracking and camera alignment. So it takes each image and says it's a different camera, and it will try and place that camera in 3D space using triangulation of feature points. Usually this doesn't take too long, but I'll skip to when it has completed. Okay, so our next step is to create a model. So just to see if what we've got works, we can create a preview model. This will create a very low poly model, and it will texture it as well with vertex painting. So it won't create a UV map, it will just colour each vertex, which is good enough to preview it. It's usually fairly quick, and it comes up with lots of errors, like my hands being a bit weird here, and the feet, as well as the stool. And it has also created lots of geometry for some things we don't need. So our next step is to set the reconstruction region. So to set the reconstruction region, we just click this little drop down and set it automatically. And that will give us these points. We can drag, move around, and we don't need to do any more on the lower one. We can move it in this way and move it here, cut down the head a bit. Okay, so that looks about right, which will only reconstruct and model what is inside this box. So now we can choose which resolution we want our model in. So let's have a look at the settings here. So normal detail will construct a model in multiple parts if this is set to false, and each one of those parts will be maximum of 8 million polys, or points, sorry, vertices. So let's go ahead with doing a normal resolution. If you were just doing a head scan and you had a photogrammetry rig like this, you could go ahead and do high detail. So high detail is a lot higher. I'm not really sure. I guess you can just play around with the results. You can have 2 different modes, I guess, but we're just going to use normal detail. And this will take a long time. This will take a very long time. So I'll see you in that long time when it's created. After a while, that has created a model for us. It's very high detailed. We can see lots of the detail on my skin here, lots of the detail on the hair, although it's a bit mushy because in general photogrammetry doesn't capture hair very well at all. You can see lots of the detail and the creases on my shirt and the jeans here. It's gone right into the under my sleeves. It's messed up a little bit on the hands. Like there's not much detail in the thumb here, and neither on this side. And we could go ahead and render it in high detail, but for what I'm using this for, we won't necessarily need that. You could go ahead and sculpt in the detail in Zbrush afterwards if you wanted to. but it's fine for now. We've got a lot of errors on the floor and the shoes, so we're missing the entire like toe of my shoe here. But again, I'm going to be inside a car, so that's not going to be a big issue. We don't not require this stool, so we're going to have to clean that up, get rid of that, and we can do that in reality capture here, or we can bring it over to Zbrush and do it. But for now, as I've recently learned how to clean up better in reality capture, let's use that method. So to start cleaning up the things that we don't need in the shot, we use the lasso tool, and just highlight what we don't want. And if you hold down the control key, you can add to that selection. So usually I go in big strokes first, highlighting everything that is definitely not what we want. And then I go in to more detail and zoom in so we can really get a lot closer to our character. So you need to be careful you don't overlap. So if I were to highlight this chair now, I'd be getting a part of the leg. So that's something you want to be careful about. It's probably a bit too tight on the butt there. So let's just get as close as possible. And the same with this side. And underneath as well. So it's a bit tricky here. See, this is where you can get a lot done in reality capture, but you might want to take it into Zbrush to do some further cleaning up. I'll show that as well, but let's just get most of it cleaned up, or lots of the big patches. So I'm going to go around the feet here. So I'm just holding control to add to the selection each time. Going around the shoe, getting all that detail in the shoe there, even though I might not need it for this use case. And if you double click, you set the new rotation point. That's a good little tip. There we go, I might have got a bit of the lace then. Yeah, I did, so I'm going to have to redo that. Then get even closer. Yeah, there we go. And just get all this. This is all just like junk here. We definitely don't want that. It's all just massive artifacts from where reality captures got confused. But yeah, we don't want any of these huge triangles here. Because it is just going to be a bit messy. Okay. So that's this foot all done. Right, I'll get that in ZBrush, that bit. Now let's do this foot. Set the new rotation point. Alright. So we got, yeah, we're just going to have to get rid of all this piece. So you can see this is the lace loop here. And it goes in here, but I think we're just going to have to kill it all. Just get rid of all that. It's a shame because I would have liked the shoes captured, but when we were there on set, in the photogrammetry rig, it's kind of rushed to set it up. So usually you'd set it up and reset up the cameras for each character, but we didn't have time then because they were very busy working on lots of their cleanups and talking to clients. So I'm very grateful for even sparing the time to set it up so I could just get this very useful scan of my upper body, which is excellent. Alright, so I think that's about cleaned up for reality capture. And then you just need to click this button called filter selection. It will duplicate the model and remove any of the selected things. One thing that's quite important is that we don't have any holes in our geometry. So there's a button called close holes, and that will again duplicate our model and fill the holes. So we need to click this button and then click down here, close holes. And then it'll take a while or a few seconds, but it will close the holes. And there we go. We got closed holes. Where do we have closed holes over here? Ooh. Just turn off lasso. So we haven't got closed holes here, which is an issue. So let's just try that again. Close holes. And it hasn't fixed that either. So let's try something else. Let's go to select and then advanced and then select largest connected component. That will select the biggest model we've got. Then we invert that selection, do filter selection, and that will delete everything that is not this model. So if we've got any stray floating artifacts, just delete them. Now we go into close holes again, and then click it. Close holes. Close holes. Hopefully it should clean this up now. And no, it still hasn't. That's interesting. So let's just make 0 on that. Oh no, actually let's do it 4096, which will change the maximum amount of edges. So hopefully, because it's much more of a complex hole, it should fill it. And it still hasn't, so there must be much more vertexes in this point. So let's just add a 0 onto that and see if that works. No, so it's not working on this for some reason. I'm not sure why. That's okay, because what we need to do now is bring it into Zbrush anyway, where we can close the holes. So to do that, we will export the mesh, which is this one. First, let's rename our model to out, because it's what we're going to output. Go to export mesh, place it in our spot, and we'll call it tutorial digijack RC. We need to import our model that we just exported from reality capture into Zbrush. While using Zbrush, I always like to use my custom UI that I created alongside another cleanup artist, which is just here. Just a lot of shortcuts brought to the front screen that are useful with photogrammetry cleanup. So just having a quick look around the model, seeing if there's any major issues. We've got some big spots on my face which aren't there in real life. Got some things coming out of here, probably like stray hairs or something. We can smooth those down, but not entirely necessary for this stage. This is just a major cleanup that we'll do, like cleaning up these issues here. So let's go to close holes, which should probably work in the Zbrush version. I think it takes a while because it's quite a complex hole. There we go. And then actually let's do Control Z, and we can actually delete some of this chair a bit more, I think. So I'm just going to use the mask brush as a selection brush to select what we don't want. So I'm going to select all of this. At the same time, you need to be careful. So I just selected through the butt there into my arm. So you just got to be careful you don't select anything you don't want. Only things you do want, basically. Same issue we have with all the others. Alternatively, you could use the Control-Shift-Alt button, but first you need to click the lasso select. Control-Shift-Alt, Control-Shift-Alt, and this will hide everything selected. So I've hidden a bit too much of my leg here, which is not good. So I'm just going to hide all of this. See if that's good. Then I'm going to do delete hidden. And it'd be quite hard to select all of this because I might select some other things. So I'm just going to select this, click Control W to set it into a new polygroup, then click Control Shift click, and then click it again, which will hide that polygroup. Click delete hidden, and then go down to polygroups, auto polygroup, which will make a polygroup per separate piece of geometry, and then turn off this line, solo the biggest polygroup, then click delete hidden, and then I'm just gonna brush this in, Control W, brush this in, Control W. So these just act as like little selectors, Control W, even though it looks the same, it's different. Hit up this, Control W, this, Control W. Got a bit of these weird things around here. And I'm just going to smooth that a bit. I think that's it. So I'm going to solo the biggest component, delete hidden, close holes, and I'm going to smooth it a bit. Smooth these bits off because it looks a bit weird. And this is like the least important piece of geometry for this use case. So I'm actually going to delete that and then fill the hole with all of these bits because it's a bit spiky. Delete hidden, fill hole, then it crashed. Alright, so Zbrush sometimes crashes, so we're just going to have to do that again. So I'll catch up with you when I've cleaned up all of the mesh to the extent which I need, which is just getting rid of major spikes. You don't want to remove any detail. My model's all cleaned up now. I've removed the chair. I've removed some issues from my neck here and some big spikes. The topology on this model is not animation ready. It's a bunch of triangles. If you were to rig this, you'd have not a very nice time. So we need to retopologize this. Traditionally, you would bring this into Maya and do quad draw and create a bespoke retopologize and topology for this character. But we have access to a new tool called Wrap, which I will show you now. Before that, we need to export our cleaned up mesh. So this is what Wrap looks like. We need to bring in our clean up mesh from Zbrush, which is here. Drag that in. It's quite a high poly mesh, so it'll take a while to import into Wrap. So this part of the pipeline is called retopology. We need to get our base mesh and wrap that around our scan. So let's bring our base mesh in and let's look at the base mesh. We might have some issues with this base mesh. For example, we've got the belly button here. Because I'm wearing clothes, I don't have a belly button. We could probably get away with this because it would just wrap it flat, but I'd probably remove that. We've got the nipples. Don't need nipples because I'm wearing a t-shirt. And we got the toes. Don't need toes because I'm wearing shoes. Fingers, fine. Sleeves. It's going to be tricky because the sleeve protrudes a lot, so there's a bit of an overhang. So you might need some extra edge loops in here. Face is fine. So before we start this process, we need to edit our base mesh. And I'm going to do this in Maya. So first of all, we need let's have this on. I'm going to delete these faces. And then I will bridge them. Now we have our base mesh cleaned up, we can bring it back into wrap and start retopologizing our scan. So while working inside wrap, it's very important that we do not change the scale or any of the topology on our scan. So I'm going to rename it here, call it scan. And this is our base mesh. So we don't have any toes here and don't have any belly buttons or nipples. So it should wrap very nicely to our character. So call it base mesh. I'm going to turn the wireframe off, both of them for now, just so it's easier to see. And it's very important that they're the same scale. So let's add a rigid alignment. This will align and match the scale automatically between our two models. But we need to give it a bit of a hand by giving it some point selectors or point pairs. So it's important we have the base mesh on the left and the scan on the right. Otherwise it would have changed the scale of the scan, which is not what we want. So it's clear, and 1, 2, 1, 2, and the same with this side. 1, 2, 1, 2, and now if we hook that up, hopefully it will match. There we go. So our scale is pretty much matched now. If this guy were to bend his legs, he'd be sitting down in the same position as me. So our next job is to select more detailed point pairs, and because this base mesh is quite different to the scan, we're going to have to select quite a few. We also need to select what we don't want to wrap. So for example, we don't want the inner mouth to wrap or the eye bags to wrap. So let's do that first. So we need to select polygons. And I'm going to turn the wireframe on again. And we will select this loop. Oh. So I'm just trying to find a loop that goes around the inner eye, so we can isolate it later, and the mouth as well. So there's a little trick: if you select loops, then you can hide it, hide selected, and now we can just double click to select what we don't want to wrap, and everything else is good. Yeah. Okay, so now step 2 is to select the points. So between this and this one. Okay, so you can click this button to sync the views, and then we can zoom in and out. This might not be extremely helpful for this because our views might not line up. No, they don't. So we can kind of do it manually. So corner of the eye, inner eye, corner, and I'm going to go one up on that one. And it's very important that, so for example, if I were to click here or here, here and here. This is wrong because 8 is on the bottom and 8's on the top here. So you can just move the round if you make a mistake. So I'm starting off with a face first, because I guess that's the most important for a character. And the eyes are most important. And then we do... Ears are kind of tricky sometimes, because everyone's ears are quite different. But if you just get the main landmarks, that should be alright. And it makes it so much easier that I have a good quality scan as well. I can see so much detail to select these points. And I've done it before where I actually had a texture inside of wrap on my model to help me with setting these points up. So, for example, I could drag this texture into wrap and then it would show up on the guy here, but don't need that here, so I'm just going to disconnect it. Don't want to get too distracted. So next is lips. So this guy has quite different lips to me. So I wonder how accurate it would be. So there's hardly any detail in his lips, whereas there's a lot more here. Corners. And then I usually go tip of the nose, then chin. And that's usually it for the face. I think that will do for 32. Now we need to do the key joints. So elbows, because my elbows are very much bent here. And elbow. And shoulders. Imagine where the belly button is. Then let's look at the back. So I'm going to do back of the shoulders, shoulder blade kind of area. I think one in the centre of the back, and then one on the lower back, then one on each butt cheek. Okay, I'm going to go on the back of the knees. Then I'm going to go on the front of the knees. And if your base mesh isn't as detailed as this, it might be hard, if they've got straight legs, it might be hard to find where the actual knee bend would be. So I guess just make the best judgment you can. Now we're going to have issues with the feet here, but that doesn't matter for this stage. So we just want to get as tight as a wrap to this model as possible. The tighter and the more accurate we can get, the higher quality the texture projection will be. And then, after we've projected the textures, we can go along and make our model look nicer. Make it more symmetrical, make the topology look nicer, but for this stage it just matters if it needs to be as close as it can, as in the wrap. Something that's going to be difficult is the hands, so I'm going to put quite a lot of points on the hands and the fingers. It's the wrong one, there we go, because the hands are very, very different. So back of the wrist and on each knuckle. So for this I'm going to put the texture back on, just so it can help me, and turn the wireframe off. So now that is so much easier to kind of guess where each knuckle is, 'cause, you know, we can see, can't we? Then each one of these. And each fingertip, well, fingernail I guess, which is more difficult here because there's quite a lot of noise. There we go, thumb, knuckle, which is here, then a thumbnail, which is here. So we'll see, hopefully that should be enough for the hands. And now let's do it on the reverse. So we got back of the hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just going to move this one into the center a bit. There we go. Then on each fingernail as well. Just going to have to make our best guess here. It's not going to be perfect. And I'm going to do one on the palm as well. Alright, I'm going to do one on each inside of the elbow. Here. And you know what, I think that should be enough. Alright, let's give it a go. So next thing is wrap, type in wrapping, and then this goes into here. Let's put this, sorry, actually the rigid alignment goes into the first one, scan goes into the next one, then it is the point select, and then the geometry. Then we click auto compute, or compute. This is quite fun to watch because you can kind of see it happening in real time. First of all, it just has to load all the geometry, and it should take a while. I'm going to fast forward this so you don't have to wait. Now my character is wrapped. You can see the topology is very clean, and it's using the same topology as the base mesh. So let's have a look at that more in detail. So let's disconnect the texture and turn off wireframe. Actually, let's keep it on. So around the face here, we've had some issues. Not sure why that is. Let's just check back in here. I have no idea what this is. I think when labelling this I might have done them the wrong way around. And yes, so see here, 50, 50, it's the wrong way around, so let's just swap those. And then we're going to have to recompute, I'm afraid. It takes quite a long time to rewrap. So yeah, let's rewrap that and hopefully it should be a lot better. The face is looking a lot better now, although we have a lot of jaggedy edges around the eyes, which isn't an issue for our texture reprojection, but we would like to clean that up to make it look a lot nicer for our final object. Another thing is these sleeves. If we have a look at here, the sleeves are not good enough really. They're not wrapping tight enough to the edge, so as well as the trouser leg here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is do another stage of wrapping. So if we subdivide the geometry, put that into here. When you're using wrap, if you hold down Control and click, it will solo a layer, or a node I mean. So we subdivided that once. Let's go back into selection of a polygon and select the mouth bag and eye bags again, just so we won't wrap these. Ooh. So he's going to click on this, then here we go, it's alright. Then the mouth as well. Hide, selected, double click to select a whole connected island. Although it doesn't look like that one worked over there, so let's do show all, unhide all. Then let's get this loop here, loop around the mouth again, hide, selected, double click to select, shift, double click, and then create another wrap, put that in there, put that in there. So for this one we don't need the point pairs, as the geometry is overlapping so much already. We can just go ahead and compute. Now this has been reprojected. Now this has been wrapped further, we can begin to see less separation here. We can use the brush node to further project our new topology on our scan so we can get this gap even tighter. So I'm going to connect them up, geometry, then our reference, which is our scan, and then our source, which is our subdivide, I think. Yeah, that works. So it's just like Zbrush, where we can do some general sculpting, but it's got some good brushes like project. So this should this should be able to allow us to move and project our scan back into place slightly better, although it's having lots of issues at the moment. See all these spikes, don't know why that's happening. Let's give it another one. So clone will use the original the original base mesh structure and put that back on. So if I wanted the fingers to look more like fingers, that will, the clone brush is that one. But I need to figure out how to get this to be moved onto there and stick it on as if it's a live object. So this seems to be working to some extent. And I can go in and smooth it back down, relax. But if we relax too much, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel on this brush, and I think we can call this a good wrap. Yeah, it looks quite good. It's very tight to our original scan, so we can imagine it will project the texture very well. So I'm going to go ahead and export this, which is save geometry. And it's important to save it as the exact same file name as what was taken out of reality capture. So let's go ahead and replace that, save it, compute current frame. Then let's go back into reality capture. Now we can bring in our model from wrap using the import model button, and it is named the exact same thing, which is this one, open. And now we have an issue here. Our model is absolutely tiny, which is going to be a big issue. So I'm going to pause the video and figure out what I did wrong. So it's very important that you import your model into the correct component. So the component that I imported the model in originally was the component set to the wrong scale. So let's go back into the correct component, which is this one. Remember, it's always good to name your components down here. So let's call this scaled, or scale. Now import our model again, and it's right here, and it should come in at the correct scale. There we go. This model is called Model 11. Let's call it Retopo. And now, if we go to Solid, we can see that our points match up. There we go, all good. So we can now begin to texture. So if we go to settings, we can choose what texture size we want it to project as. I'm going to do 8K for now, but the best is 16K, and you can always downscale it, so it's worth generating the highest texture. But for now I'm going to do a temporary colouring, which is a vertex painting basically, and that will colour each vertex just so we can have an idea of what our model will look like coloured in. This obviously will take a lot longer depending on the size of your model and how many vertexes there are. So it's finished vertex painting or colouring, and when you import a scanned model that has been retopologized, for some reason it displays as black when it's finished colouring now, and for some reason when you import a retopologized mesh into reality capture and you colour it, it only shows up as black when it's finished, but you can tell it has coloured it because the vertexes have been coloured in. Okay, so let us do a proper texturing. This will take a long time, this will take a while, so you've got to be patient, but in the meantime I'll fast forward it for you and show you when it's finished. It's finished texturing now, so we can zoom in, see how much detail it's captured, and I think it's done a very good job, especially on the face. Very good. Okay, next step is to export the model, which will export the model and the texture. So let's call it tutorial digijack rc underscore text. This will export the texture as a TIFF, or you can choose from loads of other texture file formats. Export. Now let's go back into wrap. This is where we can make our wrapped mesh look pretty, basically. So we don't need any of this because we're going to do our clean up on the low poly version. Okay, so let's use the brush tool and geometry, reference, and what's this one? Source. Okay, so we'll go into the visual editor, and now we can start relaxing it and cloning it to make the topology nicer as well as the model. So let's start with the fingers. I'm going to zoom in here and set it quite high, and I'm just gonna clone to kind of relax it, as well as project it as well, although projection doesn't really work. So let's inflate, relax, clone. See, clone, what it does is it takes it back to the original state of our base mesh. So that's not really what we want to do. I think we should just relax it quite a lot to fix lots of these issues, but probably a lot. There we go. And so you could go into Zbrush as well and try and fix this up in Zbrush, but I quite like the tools in Wrap because we have access to our original geometry as well. So that's not too bad for a hand. And then let's see what we can do on this one. It looks a bit funny there. So let's just relax that and sculpt that. I'm going to use the pen here. So just so they're not actually intercepting each other, just relax them. So there we go, and a bit of sculpting here. Oh, lost myself here. Oh, here we are. Then we can use the move to kind of. Oh, that's the move brush is very strong for sculpting. Alright, I think we just need to do a little bit more. You can spend a lot more time getting this really good in Zbrush, but I just want to really separate those fingers. Probably inflate a tiny bit as well, and then relax that. Then just sculpt a bit up on this one. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that looks fine. Not the thumb though. So let's relax this quite a lot. Okay, that's good for the hands. Now when it comes to the face, we can use a bit more of the clone brush. So we got lots of issues on the lips here. So let's use this clone brush to neaten up everything, including the eyes. And all this is doing is sampling from our base mesh with the nice topology, and it's basically just smoothing everything up, because if we were to use normal relax it would just loosen everything, but we're actually getting it quite tighter onto the form of our muscly man that we've got. Yeah, all good. And now let's do a bit of the nose so we can get in there. Just emphasize a bit the forms that we lose during our whole process of wrapping it. Now we can get rid of the wig cap as well, just by cloning that in with quite a strong brush. And lots of the hair on my neck as well. Let's turn off those wireframes. And we can, it's better. Alright, that's not too bad. I think that's pretty good actually. Apart from the hands aren't very good. Now the feet. The feet got wrapped to that thin little thing which was the shoe, so let's do this. And we can have a nice even shoe or foot thing here. There we go. And I just want to smooth this out a bit. Great. Alright, so now we need to click apply. And then save this out to, so save geometry. And call it wrapped low. So that's our wrapped low poly mesh. Now we can bring that into Zbrush. Import the wrapped geometry, which you need to remember to click compute current frame. So this is wrapped low. Import that into Zbrush. Then go append then import our clean one. Should be exactly the same scale. It's just importing now. Great, perfect. And now what I would like to do is get a lot more detail around the waist on the shirt. So this is for a displacement map. So if I just loosely select what I want as a displacement, so I'm basically selecting most things that aren't the hands, basically, because the hands won't get very well displaced at all. And the wig cap I do not want either. So I'm going to go quite close down here. But I want all these shoulders, all the outside. Great. I don't want under the arms because that's going to struggle with projection. I want all this. I want all this. Don't necessarily want the back of the legs too much. Okay, now I want a bit of the back of the neck. Then we go to masking, blur, blur, blur. Then click to invert the selection. And then go to subtool, project, and then project all. Perfect. Press Ctrl W to save that selection as a kind of polygroup, yeah. Then subdivide the mesh in Zbrush, subdivide. So let's go to 4 subdivisions, go to subdivision 2, and then click this. Then we can do a blur again, and click to invert. Then project. Then divide again and project. Then go on our 4th level and let's project one last time.
That's too powerful to keep alive. Kill. Wait. I hate Twitter. I think about deleting mine all the time. What I don't like is the constant posturing that goes on there. People just can't seem to help themselves from pointing out what is good and what is bad, or how others are bad and you are good, to a point where it almost becomes fiction just to satisfy this need. And I don't mind that this happens. I understand that it does. But what annoys me most about it is that it gets rewarded. Through social media, we get likes, we get engagement by posting about certain things. It's very popular. A classic example could be J.K. Rowling changing the sexual identity retroactively on her characters as a way to posture for social virtue points. This, to me, is a good example because most understand that it's complete bullshit, but it's not always easy to tell what is genuine online. Contrasting this using sports as an example, previously we have for thousands of years rewarded the winners, the people who act, the ones who run the...
Okay, now that's projected. We can see a huge amount more detail on here. I'm gonna go back to some of our lower ones because I think I made a mistake with the projection, because I should have masked out the eyes as well. So let's just go back to here, make the brush smaller, and really let's mask out these eyes because we don't want them being projected onto. Let's do just 3 levels this time. And I think it might be overkill otherwise, and we need to reselect all of our stuff we don't want. Let's just do it this way for now. Can blur that, then let's go in and project our geometry again. And divide, project. Divide and project. However, we're still getting some errors around the mouth here. So let's go back, go back, and I'm going to reaffirm this mask here and make it really solid. Here it is. Alright, let's give it another project. It's a bit of a trial and error process. Then blur it. Ooh, blur. Project. Good, it's all looking good. Divide and project. So in the final model, there's a logo on my shirt, as you can see here. I'm going to get rid of that logo because it actually shows up on the geometry as well. So I'm just going to go in and smooth it off a little bit on each subdivision. There we go. Not bad. We got a few errors around here. So just to smooth off any spiky parts, I'm gonna go deformation, and then put this on like 3, or probably 1 actually, or even the crisp edges. That's better. Okay. Alright, so I'm also going to smooth down this hair. And just smooth off any bits that I don't want to see in the final model. Yeah, definitely not this hair here. But now it looks pretty good. Yep, I'm liking that, so I'm going to go to the highest subdivision, go down to Z plugin, then export, multi-map exporter, displacement, set it to 8K, and click export all maps. Digijack wrapped low PSD. Okay. And it will save us a displacement map which we can project onto our geometry. So it's always good to work on a symmetric object. So when rigging this object, it's always good to work on a symmetrical object when rigging. So wrap has a really good symmetrize button, so it's called fix symmetry. And this will allow us to have a perfectly symmetrical model, and our displacement that we've just gathered from Zbrush will allow us to have some irregularities in the actual mesh. So it takes a little while to fix this geometry. In the meantime, we can go ahead and start fixing our model and our texture. So let's jump into Photoshop and open up the texture that we exported from Reality Capture. I'm going to import the full male texture that I'm going to import the full male texture that 1024 allowed me to use into Photoshop as well to help with the cleanup. And here we go. So in fact, I don't require the black border around, so I'm actually going to delete this and import it from here directly. Just drag it over. Perfect. Great, and just to check if it lines up, and it does. Alright, now we need to match this colour to our Jack version. So let's go to curves. I'm just going to move it down so I can kind of see the colours a lot better. I'm going to brighten it up. I'm going to perhaps put a hue and saturation and change the hue ever so slightly. And yeah, I'd say around there. I'm going to brighten that up again in Photoshop with the curves. Possibly under here and down a bit. Oh, yeah, I think that's not too bad. Alright, we can move this over to here now. I'm going to make this in a group. I'm going to apply the adjustment layers to the group and not, there we go. I'm going to turn them off temporarily, add a mask on here, and start painting, invert the mask of course, and start painting away my hair. So I've got a brush here, and I can just paint, if I change the opacity, I can paint that hair back on. So I'm going to go to brush settings. I'm going to add a bit of scattering that's already there. So let's go ahead and paint away my hair. And you see, with my adjustments, the skin matches mine a bit better, doesn't it? So I'm going to carry on painting away the wig cap and these parts here. And I can clean up some of this texture by replacing it with the other man's ear. I can clean up a lot of this lip texture by just replacing it with the other man's lips. And I don't think it's actually in the right position. Oh, it is. That's fine. Okay. So already that looks a lot better. I could just gonna drop the opacity a bit just to blur it in slightly better. Blend it in, and with the eyes as well. Here we go. Can even take a little bit of his eyelid to try and smooth out this curve. That's a bit better, and smooth this out as well. So I am just trying to take a lot of the texture that I've got already, get rid of those eyelashes. Alright. Like I said, I'm going to get rid of this logo here just by using a spot healing brush. So I'm going to... Alright, that's good enough. I'm also... I think that's pretty good. I'm going to clean up some of this as well. Just with the spot healing, just so I look a little bit cleaner. Digital shaving, I guess. I'm going to go around with this brush with less opacity so I can really just blend it in, and I'm going to up the scattering as well. So I want to keep as much as my real head as possible. There we go. And then on top of all of this, I'm going to add a blank layer where I can do some cleaning up to the overall image. So with the spot healing, we got that. I want to get rid of some of these wrinkles. I'm going to get rid of some of this. Just cleaning him up a bit. Do a bit of clone stampage. There we go. Not too bad. I'm going to replace the hands entirely with his hands. Maybe just the fingers actually. So I'm going to replace the fingers with his fingers, just like this. Super easy. Pretty good. Very nice. Fix down here. Very nice. And I think that's about it for the texturing. I'm going to do a bit more cleanup with this, because I don't want his neck around about there. Just blending it in a bit more, really. And then I'm going to fix the inner ear here. There we go. It's pretty good actually. I'm going to go ahead and save this as a Photoshop document. Call it DigiJack Color Clean. And there we go. I've brought the model into Substance Painter now, so I can begin to clone stamp the texture to get rid of this chair texture on the leg here. So after we've cleaned up our colour map in Substance Painter, we can just drag it into Alchemist and it will automatically create a normal map, roughness. In this case we don't need any metallic map. It creates a height, ambient occlusion, and that's it. We don't need this opacity map either. So we can go ahead and fine tune some of these, but I found the defaults work best for me. And then we go to export current view, and then change it to 4K, the highest. So I'm not going to export the base color again, just the normal, the roughness, the height and the ambient occlusion. Don't need any of the others. I'm going to choose where it needs to go. So I'm going to create a new folder called texture maps. Should go in there. Call it DigiJack. Now if we go back into our files, texture map, DigiJack, and it's just exporting now. While that's exporting, I'm going to create a more detailed displacement map using Photoshop. So I was taught this method by Chris at 1024, and I've used it on multiple of my experiments and some tests, and it seems to work very well. So first of all, you need to convert your image to black and white. Then you need to apply a contrast. So I'm going to use levels for this. So I'm just going to boost the contrast a bit on the blacks and the whites. Then you need to go to Filter, Other, High Pass. So let's just zoom in on the mouth and on the face. And because this is an 8K image, I'm going to set the pixel radius to 5%. Sorry, 5 pixels. And this is just going to create lots of the very fine details, so lots of the wrinkles, pores, bits of hair, as well as lots for the shirt as well. So I'm going to go ahead and export that as a displacement. Texture maps, DigiJack. Let's just see if it's put it in there yet. So it's actually exported it as a substance archive from Alchemist, so we'll sort that out later. And it should be right just as a TIFF. Call it displacement. So we actually have to go to, sorry, I need to set this to TIFF, and that's all fine. It's a shame you can't do 8K in Substance Alchemist. So the different maps are just going to be slightly lower quality than our colour map, which is fine. So we want normal, roughness, height, ambient occlusion, and that's it. Now let's bring these into Maya, and we can start assigning our maps. Now I've brought my textures and my model into Maya, we can start linking up the maps in the correct place and start really developing the look of the character. First of all, we need to soften the edges, and then we can begin to hook up our colour. So because this is a character with skin, it'd be best to use subsurface scattering. So after we've hooked all our maps up, we can begin to look at the subsurface scattering colour and how to set those settings up. So here we have our colour, but it's still very, very shiny. So let's just put our roughness in the specular roughness, and we can use the red channel for that. Another way to do that is go to colour balance, then say alpha is luminance, and use the alpha, but I find it quicker just to use red. It's exactly the same. And we can turn our roughness down using the the specular. Something that will help out with this shininess is applying a normal map and a height. So first let's connect the normal map. So after this is loaded, it should create some normal displacement on some of these highlight areas. And break it up a little bit. So we've got some less highlights here. So if you just go around a little bit, it's creating lots of issues here. So we might end up not using the normal map because we have a good displacement. However, let's look at the settings in the normal. So let's try using the normal map in the normal camera. Now it's still creating lots of these issues here, which I think might be something to do with lighting because it keeps changing. So instead of that, let's use a displacement shader and plug that into here. So we can use the height, and this is the one that Alchemist created for us. So let's see what result that gives us. First of all, let's change the subdivisions to Cat Clark and give it 3 subdivisions. This has created some breakup in the highlights, but I still don't think it will be as good as our displacement we made in Photoshop. So if I just connect that one now, I think this one will drive a lot more breakup than the one from Alchemist. And yes, we can totally see what a massive difference this displacement map's made. If we go into the basic shading mode, we can really see the texture that it's giving my face here. I think it's still a bit too strong, so let's go into the object and I'm going to set the scalar 0 value to 0.5. However, this basically shifts the grey point of the displacement. So usually with Zbrush displacements you set it to 0.5, but I guess with the Photoshop ones you leave it at 0 and it still looks good. So I'm going to set the scale to this to 0.8. And that looks pretty great to me. I think it's especially impressive on the shirt here. We can really see that detail. Although I think it's too shiny on my skin. So I'm going to change the IOR to skin. That should help. and I'm going to bring it down a small amount. I would also consider disconnecting all the things we made in Alchemist, so I can have control over the roughness myself. Alchemist is great for hard surface texturing, or for texturing things that aren't human. I think my workflow with the displacement from Photoshop's a little bit better than Alchemist. So we've got lots of dark edges here, and it doesn't really look like skin. That's where we can use the subsurface color. So if we go into the main attributes and turn on subsurface, set that to 1, then set the color to our map. Oh, sorry. Set the color. There we go. And then the default scale is 1. And I usually like to pick a color from like a reddish cheek, or usually the lip is good. And that just makes our skin look a little bit more realistic. However, this takes a lot longer to render. Especially with the new Random Walk 2. I'd actually change the hue of this to slightly more of my skin colour, and brighten it up a lot as well. So the brighter it is, the more light will go through it. And it's usually good to pick a more red tone, although I'm going to desaturate a little bit. So it's quite simple. I wouldn't use the normal, I wouldn't use the roughness, I wouldn't use the height generated from Alchemist. You can play around though. Something I might be tempted to use is a composite, AI composite, and use a multiply with the ambient occlusion. So if we just turn this off, go back to colour and put colour on here, that way we can add some ambient occlusion to our map. Which will help with some baking in some shadows, basically. You just gotta set it to the multiply, which will get rid of the white and only show up the dark points. So if we connect this to the subsurface color and turn the subsurface back on, should be a bit darker in some of the more occluded areas. I don't usually try this, and I haven't tried this method before. Will be very subtle anyway. So once we have our texture and our material fully set up, we can begin the rigging process. The rigging process is very straightforward because I'm using a tool called Advanced Skeleton. It makes it very easy to import and set up a rig for a character. So you can see here, I just have to set up these points for one of the sides, the right side. So just get the foot, move it into place, rotate, scale it up. You'd spend a lot more time doing this for one of your own characters. I'm just showing you just for an example. So, if you go through all of these steps and go through the correct skinning, you'll have a final rigged character. You'll be able to move around just like I showed at the beginning of the video. Thank you for watching. Hope this video wasn't too long, and hope you found it useful.